Elena.
Okay. Thank you everybody for your patience. So we got everybody into the room and into the Zoom. This is technically a special meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. This is really a joint meeting with the municipalities to continue to discuss the fire authority. And first thing on the agenda is public comment. I'm going to open it up for public comment. We'll do a round of introduction before I hand it off to the facilitator. Is anyone here for public comment? Beth, do you see anybody on Zoom that
No, sir.
might be?
Everybody's a panelist, so.
I'm going to close public comment. Let's do a round of introductions. Why don't we start in the back of the room with you, Andy?
Andy Marsh, Idaho Springs City Administrator.
Guy Patterson, Idaho Springs Deputy City Assistant.
First week.
Welcome. Hey, hey, welcome. Let's go to Chuck.
Seats at the table too.
Hi, Chuck
Mike.
Mayor Idaho Springs.
Jeremy Jones, Quigley Fire Authority.
Beth Luther, Clear Creek County.
Brian Bossart, Clear Creek County Manager.
Mitch Houston, County Commissioner from the East End.
George Marlin, County Commissioner, Central District.
Bill Ray, and I'm the consultant.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Barge, CDR Associates, also a consultant.
Jeanette Peel, Empire Town Administrator.
Rich Barrows, Georgetown Board of Selectmen.
Randy Wheelock, County Commissioner.
Randy Horning, Empire Board of Trustees.
Let's go to Zoom.
Kelly Babian, Fire Chief.
Lynette Kelsey, Police Judge for Georgetown.
Nice. Anybody else, Beth?
There's Mike Anderson, Aaron Crawley, and Jody Hartman Ball are all on.
Mike Anderson's Clear Creek Fire Authority for Idaho Springs.
They might be away from their computer.
Okay. We'll call the introductions complete. Oh, go ahead, Jody.
Jody Hartman Ball, Clear Creek County Commissioner-elect for District 3.
And Aaron Crawley is our EMS director. My guess is he's addressing an emergency.
He does.
Okay, so yes, we are here. This is a joint meeting with the municipalities to discuss the fire authority. We do have our facilitator, Jonathan Barch. Rather than describe what we're going to do, I'm going to trust Jonathan can do a better job than me.
Well, I don't know about that, but good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. Kind of thinking about kind of where this group's come over the last number of months, and it's pretty impressive. Just to kind of talk about survey results here today. Obviously, we have the executed IGA that Peter sent around, and sort of big acknowledgement about that. And today we want to, in addition to the survey results and what do they mean for moving forward, talk about this group itself in terms of process and sort of what are next steps, if any, for this group. And so that's basically the agenda for today. Are there any questions, anything else to add to our meeting? Any updates for the good of the fire authority? All right, well, let's jump into the survey results. Bill.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for having me here this morning to walk through the survey results with you. And please, throughout the process, interrupt me, ask questions. Let's talk about this and have a dialogue about what it's telling us and what it might mean for moving forward. So, sorry, there we go. So I'm going to just jump into it. I usually often leave the observations to the back, but I've started to move it to the forward because I think it's important to already just kind of know at least what I see, and that'll help us kind of generate questions as we go through. So I'm going to just jump ahead and give you the highlights on the front end. One great part of the survey was that the fire authority has a high approval rating. The folks who took the survey, they think you're doing a good job.
Yay.
And I think that's great because it's nearly impossible to go and ask voters for support if they don't think you're doing a good job. They don't really like to give you tax dollars if they don't think you're going to spend them wisely. So they have and that you're doing your job. So you have a high approval rating and also a strong rating of confidence handling tax dollars. So I think that's great. Residents who answered the survey, they're really concerned about wildfire risk and the cost of housing. And guess what? That's what we see in every mountain community in Colorado. So you're not an outlier. Obviously, percolating throughout the survey, though, as you're not going to be surprised, is concerns about the local economy, what I-70 traffic means to the county. That's just always kind of part of the undertone of the survey. Property taxes, major concern among residents. You're not different in that from any other community in the state of Colorado. You know, the recent assessment changes, all the talk of property tax, and then those bills that came. No one in Colorado wants to talk about their property taxes unless someone says that they could go down. And that's not probably going to be happening in most places. So there's in the survey in the open-ended, there were folks who brought up that they had concerns about the county and about the having a role of the BOCC in the fire authority. So it's just something I'm flagging. It wasn't something that took over the survey, but I think it's something worth kind of bringing to the front. Sales tax was the preferred funding option. But, you know, there's still concerns about sales tax. It's not a slam dunk. It's not like everyone said, hooray, raise my sales tax. Folks did talk about it being regressive, or I'm on a fixed income and that impacts me as well. And the concerns that a potential sales tax would push some of our municipalities up into those highest levels of sales tax rates. And what would that mean for those communities?
Yeah, certainly heard that here in these discussions over the last number of months too.
Yeah. But throughout, there's support for that move, that suggested move to more paid firefighters, that paid firefighting model. But folks did bring out in the survey, you know, why does it cost so much? Or what really is creating the costs here of that? So there's more education of the community, I believe, warranted here. Moving forward, need to address why the authority responds to and has to pay for out of their budget service calls on I-70. That's just such a strong theme throughout the survey responses that people don't like it, but they need to understand it might not be a choice. And of course, throughout the survey, people were saying, well, make CDOT pay for it, make the federal government pay for it, make someone pay for it other than us. So I think we're going to have to address that, and we're going to have to get ahead of that, or we're going to be in, it's just going to be an issue if we don't communicate those I-70 issues. I think it's important to continue to educate on our accountability to taxpayers with our funding. And opportunities I noted throughout this survey exist to further educate our residents about the authority's role, their service quality, their taxpayer accountability. You know, personally, I think the results show that we have a lot to build on. Sometimes when I do these surveys, it's like, oh my gosh, we got to reset with our taxpayers. Here, I think we get to expand with our taxpayers. Yes, there's questions to answer, but we have opportunity. All right, just to summarize, as you know, we sent this out as part of a mailer and went out to 3,500 households in our community. went out in late November. The reason we did a mailer instead of maybe like calling people on the phone is I think we had a lot of educating to do on the front end. If we just did a survey on the phone and started talking about paid firefighter models and this, and I just don't know if people would have really had an understanding of what we were talking about. So I think it was important to get some education materials out in front of people and then see how they react to it. Did they see messaging from us about what the fire authority is facing and what our proposed solution is? And how do they react to it? So that's what we're looking at in this survey is when we educate someone, how did they respond to that information we provided them? We promoted, made sure folks knew this was coming. And through text, we got a press release out, social media postings. And as of when I closed the survey on December 10th, so I could put this together, we had 344 responses. Fabulous. I think that's a great return rate. Most of the time when we do a survey, we're hoping for 250 to 300 responses. Most importantly, as I'm going to start going through with you, we captured the right percentages of our demographics. That's what, when I do these, that's what makes me feel confident that we have good instructive information here that will help inform what we're doing going forward. So here on this slide, we see our age range, and we only ask a few demographic questions in these kind of mailer surveys because folks they're not going to answer what political party, what's your income. It's just too many, and then we lose folks. So I like to ask a few basic ones. Age is critical because we know on tax questions, and we know that if this is possibly going to be in an odd numbered election year, if you decide to move forward, that actually the single greatest determination of how people would likely vote on this is their age. Typically, the older you are, the more tax sensitive you are. However, I find in every fire authority or fire special district I work with, the older you are, you also want to be able to rely more and more on your emergency services. So school districts really suffer with an older voting population because they don't have kids in school or they feel I've done my part for the school district. But in the case of fire districts, fire authorities, older voters tend to kind of buck the trend because they want to know when they make that call, they're going to get their service. Okay, so real quick, the 2025 LV column, what is that? Because you'll see that a couple times. That are likely voters. So I can go into the statewide voter database. Voters are incredibly habitual people. If you vote in every election, you're probably going to vote in the 2025 election. If you only vote in the presidential election, you're probably not going to be voting unless we sat you down in a room and made you fill out your ballot. Voters are incredibly habitual. I can't tell you how they're going to vote, but I can probably tell you if they are going to vote. So when I put these survey results kind of through the lens, I want to put them through the lens of the next available election, if that's what because that's how we should be looking at this. So you can see here in this chart, 18 to 34-year-olds, they would make up just under 10% of the voting out, the voters in 2025. And they were about 8.5, a little more than 8.5% of the survey responses. 35 to 44-year-olds, 13% to 12%. Where we were just a little shy really was 65 and older, but still 35.5% of all these were from folks 65 and older. So, a really good balance. We had about 8% who said they preferred not to tell us their age. Typically, when I'm doing this, I find those are typically 65 and older voters who just don't really want to give their age. Because at the same time, that same 8%, I went and looked, said that they've lived in this community for 21 years or longer. You can just extrapolate. These are probably older voters anyways. Zip code. So that's another demographic. And you can see, once again, we pretty much hit our zip code targets here pretty well. Almost an exact match in 80436. We were a little light in Empire. Georgetown, we had a little more, just a slight bump. Yeah, Idaho Springs, pretty close. So really aligned with the zip code. So another great thing here. Gender, another question we asked, pretty close to those targets as well. All just kind of right in that middle statistical error kind of area. And then I did ask one question. I just was curious how long you've lived in Clear Creek County. And you can see about 56% of folks said they've lived here 21 years or longer, with another 14% saying 11 to 20 years. I went through the statewide voter database and I looked up when people registered to vote at their current address here in Clear Creek County. 64.5% of your likely voters have lived here 15 years or longer. So once again, another number that kind of shows that we got a good representation in this survey of this kind of voter audience we're going to be looking at if you decide to move forward. Okay, so let's get into some of the questions. First question, I always like to just get a sense of what's on the top of your mind. And so we asked, what would you say is the most important issue facing the county or town where you live? And you can see the top answer is wildfire risk. The next one down is housing. And like I said, that aligns with every mountain community where I work. Traffic drops off, everything kind of falls off from there. In the orange, folks could give their own issue. And you can see I pulled those out for you. It wasn't a lot of different, homeowners insurance. That probably goes back to wildfire risk. Need to generate more revenue, too many STRs, childcare, in a lot of mountain communities, childcare comes up quite a bit. So you can see those answers, but they're still aligned with kind of these concerns. All right, so we asked two questions about the authority itself. How would you rate on a scale of 1 to 5? 5 being highest, the job the authority does. You can see 44.78% gave it a 5, with another chunk at 4. So our average rating was 4.44. I think that's fabulous. It's hard to start when it's 2.44 in a conversation because you have to go and find out why. And what do we need to rebuild and reconnect with our community? So we're starting from a good point. Here we had 24% who said they just don't know, right there. Opportunity to educate community members. I can at least break out and see, is that 24%? Were they from one of the zip codes? Were they from an age group? So we could maybe see, we have to educate these folks and let them know what the authority does and is doing. Likewise, are you confident that we handle your tax dollars wisely? 60% said very or somewhat confident. So fabulous. I think that's a great number. You never want to be upside down on that. That's not a good place to be. 30% were unsure. Actually, that's a pretty high number of unsure because usually people just have a visceral reaction to that. Sometimes people just don't think government ever handles tax dollars wisely. So they just say, no, I'm not very confident. So once again, a great place to educate folks so that if we continue to do messaging, we could have like a couple bullet points about transparency and accountability to taxpayers. Just wouldn't hurt as part of a messaging matrix in further outreach to the community. All right, we posed a set of statements to folks. Would you agree with one of these statements after reading all this information, 6 pages of information we gave you? And the one that resonated, thankfully, 68% of folks aligned with The authority needs to address the challenges presented by reductions in volunteer staffing, increased call volume, traffic, wildfire risk, and should seek a tax to maintain improved service levels. So you can see 68% supported that. I think that's great. What we're doing there is just trying to see, do people, what's their first gut reaction to what they saw? 15%, much smaller group, responded, let's tighten our belt. And then about 16.5% filled in an other. What I did was I just kind of absorbed those into the comments, the open-ended comments, and there is a 27-page document of all the open-ended comments for you all to review. Brian, did that get out to everyone or?
It did not.
Okay, but we'll get that out to everyone. I shared it with Brian. We'll get out 27 pages. If you can't fall asleep one night, you sit and read that, but it summarizes kind of their age, their, where their zip code, how they responded to some of the key questions. So when you read the response, you kind of have an idea who gave the response. So I folded those in there mainly because they tracked with the comments. I-70, it was just, they were just very similar. So I didn't think we needed to call them out right here. All right. Support for paid firefighters. We asked, do you believe it's a priority to transition to this paid firefighter model? And you can see here about 46% gave it a high priority, another 38% a medium priority. So at least people are recognizing this is something that probably needs to happen here for the fire authority. All right, now getting into funding. So, we did struggle a bit trying to kind of put this piece together in the mailer and in the surveys. How did we want to approach asking folks funding? We're not ready to show them a ballot question. Way too early for that. So we wanted to just kind of propose to them what we think it's going to cost to put this plan in place and how could we pay for it. So we asked folks to rank on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being very supportive, 1 being no, absolutely no. 3 options. So we will go through those. Option 1, a 1.45% sales tax on purchases within the county and the 4 municipalities. You can see that got an average rating of 3.34. You did have about 34% giving it a 5. About 16.5% giving it a 4. I think that's great. Generally, no one wants their taxes increased. So the fact that folks at least responded to it positively is at least a good starting point. In my opinion, this is all this is telling us. It's a starting point. We can't take it for granted. People want their sales tax to go up. I know there's other considerations outside of the silo of this question about, how it could impact individual municipalities to have their sales tax go up, other budget issues that might be happening here in the county. But it's a starting point to continue that conversation in this room and then eventually with the public. You really do have to show the public eventually, like in July or August, actual ballot language before you really make that final decision. People do need to react to that Tabor language because people can have a reaction to it. I'll just give you a quick example. I helped the city of Westminster. They went for a sales tax for their fire department. They had used a different pollster before they brought me in to do a poll, and the poll was glowing. People are like 70% yes, but they didn't actually ask ballot language. They asked, would you support a sales tax to support our fire? And of course, people are like, yeah, great, sure. And I flagged for the city, we don't really know how people react to the scale and scope until they see the ballot question. But they were like, oh, well, we spent our polling budget. Now we just need to run a campaign. I said, okay, I'll run your campaign for you, but I'm pretty worried. And yep, those Westminster voters rejected it. And when we did a little bit of exit polling, we found out, well, until we saw the actual ballot question, we didn't really realize how much money you were asking for. It was a pretty big sales tax increase. So before you make a final decision, you really do have to let voters see that Tabor ballot language. But anyways, you can see here in the next one, option 2, a property tax increase of 14.67 mils. It's kind of the opposite reaction. Average rating 2.52, 34% giving it a 1, 15% giving it a 2. Not like in everywhere else I'm working, when it's just property tax right now, it's a third rail. People just don't really want to talk a lot about raising their property taxes. It's a tough conversation to have. You know, for the first time ever in this past election, it was shocking how many school districts, because typically school districts go in presidential election years because the electorate's like, whatever, you know, love our schools. You need buildings, you need mill levy overrides, fine. And they lost at a really high percentage rate across the state because I think people just aren't ready to have the property tax conversation. Yes, some passed, but overwhelmingly they went down. Option 3 was a combination of a sales tax increase with a smaller property tax increase. And you can see that average rating was 3.16. So folks were a little more open to that conversation. But that blended approach might be something that needs to still be looked at because at least the respondents were open to the conversation, not as much intensity for it, but they're open to it. And maybe that will help balance some of these policy conversations that you all have to have about the impact of increasing different tax rates. All right, so I broke out the different options, just so you know, by zip code and range, age range, and you could see here the support for it by those, the strongest support for the sales tax option was in 80439, and the age group that supported the sales tax the most was 35 to 44. Just take it for what it's worth. It's just interesting data points to have to look at. On the funding option 2, which is our mill levy increase, you can see the bars drop among all zip codes and age groups. So it just kind of highlights that softness around a pure property tax. The only folks that were even above 3 in the property tax were 18 to 34-year-olds, but that's only 10% of your voter turnout. Probably maybe because they're not homeowners yet, they rent. We find that renters typically don't think they pay property tax. We know they do. It just comes in the form of their rent. But yes, typically younger voters are less property tax sensitive. Funding option 3, you can see the bars went up a little bit more and they're a little more level across the different age ranges and zip codes. So, which kind of showed in the overall numbers that it was average rating 3.16, which is right in the middle. All right. So one of the important questions I always like to ask is to break those who are either unsure or unsupportive and try and at least get some sense of why they don't support it. And you can see here that the biggest chunk, 32%, was taxes are too high. Then the next group was other, then need more information, and then it really falls off. So, no surprise, tax, kind of overall tax burden was the top issue. The next slide is those responses from other. And I'm not going to sit here and read them all because you all have a printout. You can read them, but you can see a lot of stuff about I-70. Why are we paying for I-70? That's just as I said, it's a theme, it's an undertone throughout the survey. I-70, CDOT should be paying for this, someone else. should be paying for this. We asked some kind of, would you be more likely kind of questions to kind of gauge, the messaging we could try and do around looking at a funding measure. So would you be more or less likely to support if you knew that visitors and tourists, a sales tax, if you knew visitor or tourists, that would be a way to capture their dollars to help fund our services. And you can see 69.72% said they'd be more likely to support. However, it's only fair to put the juxtaposed question out there to folks. But if you knew that could push our local towns up, over 10% and to be one of the highest in the state, how would you respond to that? And you can see about 52% said they're less likely to support. So if you do look at a sales tax, you are going to have to balance that messaging around this is a way to capture that I-70 traffic dollar from visitors, tourists stopping here. But at the same time, you're going to have to probably acknowledge that this is, this is going to put some pressure on maybe our local merchants or something. We'll have to think about how to kind of acknowledge the benefits, but kind of champion the benefits of it, but at the same time, acknowledge some of the risks from pushing up the sales tax number. And then the third one was, would you be more or less likely to support the sales and property tax proposal because it could balance funding between a sales tax where we could capture visitor funding and a property tax from our local community members. And that was, I'd say, was fairly well received at about 45%, but 30% still said likely to support. And that just points straight back to that just underlying concern around property tax. If you think about the blended approach, we're just going to have to do some work there on the property tax side with local residents and voters. All right. Open-ended responses. So in the survey, in several places, we had opportunities for people to give us their opinion, what they saw. And we had more than 90 substantive comments. Those are in a report that we'll get out to you here pretty quick. But this slide's kind of a summary slide of it, and it uses a sentiment analysis tool, and it gives these kind of red, orange, this kind of intensity bar from mad to happy. And just to warn you, in almost every survey I do, the red bar is always the biggest bar. People who are gonna write a comment, and the longer the comment is, typically are folks who find that they want to use this opportunity to air some kind of issue, grievance. But I try and pull some representative comments out for this presentation, and you can see them here. And I'll just kind of review, but they're in line with kind of everything we've already talked to. This person here says this should have been resolved years ago. Our county is a high fire risk in the mountains. We're cut by I-70 and the first county when traveling west, just that kind of angst. Our commissioners need to listen to the needs of our fire chief, trust his expertise. So, someone kind of concerned about the role of the county. Like I said earlier, that was kind of also a minor theme throughout. My biggest concern is the county trying to take over the fire authority. So that's kind of, also percolating. In the orange, county law enforcement budgets are far too high for level of services. Funds should be reallocated for fire service. Being a property owner is already very expensive. My insurance has gone up. So kind of that pocketbook. And then bringing out here, I don't sugarcoat this, the idiot drivers on I-70. I'm sure myself or my kids have been in that category. I apologize. In the yellow, not enough fire mitigation. Fires are number one threat, dead trees. So those kind of comments came up. So our county got a great deal for many years by not increasing the tax to fund the fire district. Our people should be appreciative. And now if they want their preferred level of fire service, we're going to have to fund it. So there is support out there. There are some people who recognize, like, we need to get this, we need to fund our fire service. And then there were positive comments here in the green. It seems like we're using the funds wisely and we're facing the realities of a lack of volunteers. So that's great. That's a younger voter who's, kind of in tune with this. And we want to keep our firefighters paid and our community safe. So there were positive comments. It's funny, the positive comments are always shorter comments. They're always just one sentence, and the more negative ones are always longer. But like I said, you've got 27 pages of them to go through. And I'm going to pause there for questions and conversation. And once again, thank you for allowing me to help you all with this survey.
I just sent the overhead comments out to everybody.
There won't be a test on them.
So is our goal then today in terms of looking at in addition to having conversation about the results, is it to sort of provide a general direction related to the funding options? Like what I guess I'm looking at what would be helpful in terms of advancing this with this group? And is that, so we want to have discussion and sort of engage in all of this sort of more specifics, or there's prizes, observations. But then do we want to have a direction from this group today regarding the sort of the options based off of that? Is that what we're trying to do? And I'm sort of looking a little bit to guidance over on this side of the table, or even from your perspective, Bill, about like what would be helpful if in terms of, and it is a choice, obviously, to move forward, but to move forward with, so am I being clear about that? What are we trying to do with this today? Are we trying to narrow the option, trying to define what that option is, just to be clear about where this discussion's going?
I don't think it would take a lot for us to agree on what the best option is. I mean, it is pretty clear to me that the path of least resistance is sales tax. And when you look at fairness, it also gives our visitors the opportunity to help fund our fire authority. So I think that's probably the easiest sales pitch that we could give our citizens.
You are a wizard.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
I mean, that is the opportunity I really like for.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about, so we're surprises, observations, and then we'll come back to kind of the direction from this group. Andy, did you have your hand up or no? Okay.
I guess I got one comment. When you look at this stuff, and this is the same way the road and bridge vote went really in the community. If I live in 80439, so Floyd Hill, right? Example, predominantly other than my Amazon packaging, online shopping is paying sales tax, but the majority of my commerce is probably in Jefferson County. Right? So when you look at the survey, then the survey for the county, for the road and bridge seems the same way. Very good support on the East End County, which I would have supported too, because if it's based off of sales tax, and I can calculate my percentage of sales tax by what I ordered in my house and everything else I do in Jefferson County, and it's not impacting my property tax, all for it. But so if you take that out, if you even that 80439 out of it, and take a really good look at the mix, I think you see the true picture of like residents of Georgetown not wanting to be number one in the same way, having a blend. Just looking at the data in the last couple of days, this is my opinion, but I think it paints a little different picture as far as how we interpret the impact to Idaho Springs, Georgetown, Empire. Sterling, we know they already went to 9 mil. They were very supportive of that. But the other municipalities that are gonna now, they will set a new high score for sales tax, no matter what it is. That's maybe where that blend is. And some of the other stuff like I-70 makes sense. We knew we'd see that, but 38% of our call loads I-70, US 6, US 40. But if you talk to the community, they think it's 90%. I have this conversation all the time, right? This year, motor vehicle accidents, for example, year to date is like under 19%. But you talk to the community, it's 80% of what we do. It's not. Majority of what we do literally is people that don't feel good. That's the majority of our calls. 853 calls for the year are people that don't feel good or having some medical issue of some variety. Right. So I think it's an educational opportunity. But I think when we talk to the voters in the municipal boundaries, and we've had this conversation more than once in the last 9 months, they're a little more reluctant to set a new high score on sales tax, even though it does put the burden on our visitors, especially in Idaho Springs. The number of visitors in Idaho Springs, sales tax, it's awesome. That's not the same case in some of the smaller municipalities, right? Sales tax isn't maybe a bigger driver, economic driver. There's less businesses and it's a smaller percent. So I just think it's a conversation worth having of we want support on Floyd Hill and we want support of that group. But I think we also need to kind of look at where they're basing their, because I would base mine off the same thing. If I could essentially pay less taxes by voting yes for this, by having to be all sales tax, I would probably do that. That makes any sense when you look at the data and look at the populations that we're talking about. Because it does drop 80436, which is the unincorporated part of the center of the county, right, is less supportive of sales tax. And they're more supportive of the combination because they shop within, they shop in Idaho Springs, where they do their commerce. It's a way to go deeper into the data to get into where we need to educate in a positive way and where we need to really understand the concerns of our visitors. Yeah, our 65 and older population is growing year over year. So every census is higher. We're about to send a new high score in the state of Colorado for that. And that's the reality where we're at. And that also has a different liability. But that population also has some benefits on property tax where they get some incentives where they don't pay as much, right? So that's where there's some benefits to a property tax mix for them. They pay as much property tax, but sales tax doesn't matter. Your age, they're paying the same full boat. And if they're mobility limited, they're taking a huge hit because they're buying 90% of what they buy within the community. So, and that's our biggest voting population consistently. So I think we need to balance out how we message that impact and how we educate there also, because they're going to take a huge hit for sales tax. They may take a little less of a hit for property tax. Or at the end of the day, what they're paying out.
Do you have any observations about that thought there, Bill?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to recognize that both the data and myself don't know your communities the way you know them. I always say that you take this and you put a lens on it of, does this make sense for me as someone who is a commissioner or is a mayor of one of these towns, right? So that's, to me, a real important thing is when you're looking at this, make sure to put your lens of experience being a community member, because I don't live here in Clear Creek County. So that's an important thing. And I think that's exactly what you are doing. And I think that's an important thing to do here with these survey results is, do these make sense? Do these track? Do this follow what I think I'm hearing in the community? So that's one of my observations is one of the most important parts is how you interpret this data, not as much how I do.
I have a question for Jeremy. I mean, should this be something that's the survey results and all that taken back to the fire board, discussed and figure out if the fire board wants to fund a marketing campaign for option one or number two before this group makes any decisions?
My thought is this group should ultimately this should come from this group because fire board represents this group. They're designated by this group to represent you all, right? So at the end of the day, elected officials, and I can say this because I'm also one, I handle this gentleman all the time. At the end of the day, as elected officials, we're the ones that legitimately have to talk to the voters and make the argument. So I think it should be driven from this level.
Just want to make sure that it's one voice.
I think the Fire Authority Board, and George can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Fire Authority Board will support the direction given by this group because that's ultimately who they represent.
I mean, observations and feedback from the Fire Authority Board is crucial, right? Ultimately, it's going to be the Board of County Commissioners that puts something on the ballot, whether it's a property tax or a sales tax. I know it's been the position of this board, and I think it's safe to presume it'll be the position of the future board that we want to put something on the ballot that everybody supports, right? That the municipality support, the Fire Authority Board supports. And so, yeah, I think that's a good reason. I don't think today is the day for us to say, we know we're going down this track. I think this is a good day to offer some initial reactions, talk about some next steps. A question I have for you, Bill, we did not survey the non-CCFA portion of the county, correct? Okay. So that's something to keep in mind.
Their voice is not in here.
You didn't mail things to them, but on social media, they could respond and take the survey.
And I think there was at least one person who took it that put that in there. There's nothing about us, but in there.
The thing that occurred to me was that when you laid out where this came from, you mentioned towns and then you say unincorporated, 80439 and 807, I think, yeah. And there's all of those towns have plenty of unincorporated land within their responses to. So when we're trying to differentiate between in town and out of town, that doesn't really capture it at all. And you may be already realizing that, but 80452 has a ton, and all of the others do, because the towns are very small, but they serve the rural areas around them the same as what's going on the east end of the county. So in terms of getting the flavor of who's supporting what, which way, and who's impacted different ways by fire, that's the case. I do think it's important. I think it's going to take a hybrid taxation measure just because of the size of the hill we got to climb, and the fact that I don't think either one of those methods can carry the full brunt of getting that done by themselves. That's just my initial thought. Just functionally, I don't see how we can get to the place we need to be or achieve goals that are pretty high without trying to work in both areas. But I have a lot of flip side to that is trying to sell that notion of two different taxes to the public at the same time, or whether that needs to be spread out over time, multiple elections, if that's the case.
So that's kind of your initial reaction, is that hybrid seems to make sense, but sort of it's the sequence and the strategy associated with that, Randy?
I would be concerned that whichever goes second is likely to fail if the first one's successful, because people that aren't deeply involved in the conversation will say, hey, we just did this. Why would we do it again?
I mean, that is definitely a risk, I would say, from past experience on these kind of elections.
Without a long gap in between and having it come up again,
Yeah.
having time to mature, I agree with that. So, I mean, the hybrid seems at the top of my list. That's just, I mean, the top of what I would expect to be the most successful, both functionally and hopefully at the ballot box.
Other reactions?
I just want to remind people, because I'm the only one on the other end of the world on the dark side, that if you do something that's going to, if sales tax is going to be countywide, you're going to need to come up with an argument as to what the people over there that are in the Evergreen Fire Protection District are going to get from this. And it's easy to figure to make statements about what that could be, or to work with Evergreen and define what that's going to be. But you need a hook for them.
I think first of all, you do need to have some benefit that comes to them, which we've socialized, for example, over the emerge meetings. The other thing is that when we look at a sales tax, if you look at property tax, that's definitely the case. When you look at sales tax, it's a little different, other than for Wayfair, than for online purchases and stuff like that, because quite honestly, and Jeremy pointed out, it's not just the east end of the county that tends to do a lot of all of us do a lot of our shopping outside the county, and that shopping is not impacted as long as we've got mobility to do it. We're getting better deals and better product and a broader range of things available to us by going other places. at this time.
How about others? Lynette, you have observations, reactions, questions?
Yeah, it does appear to me that the sales tax would be the easiest one to get approved. I think, especially as Mitch pointed out, if you do it sequentially and you did sales tax first, you're very likely to not get approval on the property tax proposal because they are gonna say, well, we already did this. I think there's a very strong negative reaction to increases in property tax. I think the survey showed that people are, even if you did a nationwide comparison, you might find that our property taxes aren't horrendous, but everybody feels like they're paying more than their fair share already, even if it's comparatively low to other parts of the country. That's my take on it so far.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeanette?
Yeah, property tax is gonna be hard to push an empire. We're probably advantaged community than the other municipalities, and we had the lowest, comfort level with the funding option that was property tax. So I get it. We have other costs that are going up. We're raising our water and sewer rates, everything has to go up, and that might be a harder sell than the sales tax. They're both going to be tough. We've even had people saying at board meetings, can we lower our taxes? No, you really can't. We can't survive if we do that. So they're both going to be a hard sell in our little pocket. But yeah, even by the data on here, property tax is going to be the harder sell. So, yeah.
Any other observations just in terms of whether it's the other kind of responses or anything else in terms?
They're pretty consistent. The people who are involved and come to meetings and are talking about things, they're the ones that understand that something needs to change. But you just have a lot of people that I know, the education piece, I guess, is what I'm trying to say is going to be huge for us. We had a low response. Don't know why. Sorry about that. But maybe that education piece is a little bit more important in our area because people aren't responding. They're not really watching it, or they just don't even know how to respond. So a lot of education to make sure people know we have to do something.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Agree. Yeah.
Randy, yeah, sorry.
I previously sat on a city municipality executive board for the fire department, and we went through this exact scenario of different scenarios, and we ended up pushing sales tax through. We were a 3-star municipality at the time. Moved into a 5-star or something now, but it was hard to educate the public. You got to find people like me who don't get into the internet, who don't look at their phones. It's hard to find. You can't find me. So I still challenge that question on how you find me in this stuff. But we did pass the sales tax initiative. And like I said, they went from a 3-star to a 5-star entity. It seemed to have worked. It was tough to get past like a billionaire on the other side of the state. But we answered questions and hit the ground and stuff like that. And it did end up passing, and it worked very well for us. They have brand new rigs and everything else now. So the sales tax seems to have worked, in my opinion.
I know where to find you, here at this meeting. Sorry.
I'm trying to get Wendy back.
I know.
He's talking about all the guys like him that aren't.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. Trying to be cheeky here. Sorry, go ahead.
A few thoughts. The numbers we surveyed on were the better numbers, not the good numbers. The good numbers are entirely funded with a 1% sales tax. It's important to keep in mind. That as we're talking about the risk of successive ballot measures and how close they need to be together and all that stuff, I want to remind everybody of that.
Yeah, we had three levels, a good, better, best in terms of, and we surveyed on the better.
The middle, yeah.
The middle, and that was related to the CIT, mission CIT report and sort of, and so that's a really good reminder.
And so I think, I mean, what I think makes sense is to ask for 1% for fire. And the other element of this that I think just has to be brought into the room is before the meeting, I walked into the room and people said, hey, I saw you on TV last night. We were talking about the county doing layoffs and reducing our staff to 32 hours a week because we can't afford to give them the raises that we need to give them for them to continue to hang out with us. It's my goal to figure out how to have a single ballot measure that addresses emergency services needs that are funded through the county general fund as well. And I just want to put that on the table so that you guys know the legal authority that the county would use to put a 1% fire sales tax is called the public safety sales tax. Counties can ask for a maximum of 2%. And we have big needs on the county side. And so you guys, I want you all to know that. I know this isn't the first time you're hearing that, but this needs to be part of the conversation. The county, the risk that we run a ballot measure and then can't get another ballot measure, especially given these responses, that we run a fire ballot measure and then we're waiting for years to figure out how to get a county ballot measure done as one commissioner is not a risk that I can accept. And so that's something we need to figure out how to work in. My other comment is I think that not a lot of surprises in the survey because I almost like this room is kind of a microcosm of those responses, right? There are people in this room who I think probably agree strongly with the concept that biggest problem with the fire authority is the county commissioners, right? And I think an important thing for us to do is I think that was definitely a lot of people in the room that felt like that in January. Yeah. And I hope fewer people feel like that at all. And the people that still feel like that less. And I think that's going to be an important piece of our communication to share the extent to which we have gotten on the same page. Yeah. I just don't know how we succeed without accomplishing that. And I think now it's starting to feel like I'm making a speech and I'm not trying to make a speech. Those are just kind of what was left in my mind. I have written sort of a list of what I think meaningful next steps would be, but I'm not going to jump in and share those. I just want you to know that I've got those and I'm going to sort of stop talking.
It was interesting. One of the sort of some of the specific quotes and related to sort of how I got involved with this, which was earlier in the year, and there was discord associated with the direction. And now with a fully executed IGA and the functional working of this group, at least as I've observed, I wonder how much that's sort of a holdover from some of that. There was press and different kinds of stuff related to that. And that is one of the reasons why in the last couple of meetings, I've kept going through like, what were our goals of this process? What were the options that we looked at? What's the vision and values? And I know that we sort of talked about that along with some of the ways in which this group, this IGA signatory group kind of evaluates those options and what that outcome, because I think that builds confidence. And I just wonder if some of that's a holdover and as part of the education going forward. But, once again, I do think that at least from my involvement, you've come a long way in terms of, to today. So, and then George, your other point about a 1% for fire, looking at that and not, sort of the challenges of separating a sales tax and a property tax in terms of that and that risk associated with that. So Yeah, good. Let's hold off to the next steps. More discussion. Andy, Guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would say one thing,
please.
maybe start softening the battleground now by talking about 15 to 20% of your calls rise 70. The rest are to people who are your voters who need help because they're not feeling well. And get that across that, and I don't know what is done now, if you, numbers that go in the paper monthly or whatever.
No, that was kind of the conversation we were having in the last couple of weeks. Is how do we, I mean, my question to the group, and got some numbers. How do you guys feel we should get that information out there? That's always a challenge, but it's right. That's exactly what we need to actively share information to the voter.
Yeah, so
Is that monthly? I mean, I'm not, thank you for kind of keeping me up with it. That's one of the things I want to figure out, like from you guys as a group, what do you think would work? Because I know I can run data all along and share it, but how do I get it out to more than 45 people that I talk to on a monthly basis, right, about this very subject?
I would suggest a press release and a story that details it, and then monthly follow-ups, see if you get people to say, here's your monthly totals.
Ben, I've been working with Chris with the current, so that relationship very strongly, and that's why we've been putting information out. But I think that might be the easiest avenue, but that gets a small percentage of people. Not to pick on the current, but that's this many people in the community. So I need something beyond the current to get the people that don't. Yeah, driver look at that at all, because that's what I've also found out.
I think that's more likely to work if it has to be really actively linked to the idea that, and this is our opportunity to collect from the people who are traveling through, because if you don't do that, you can also get a backfire on that. I think it's more than 15 to 20%. I think it's quite a large number. And we've got at least we've got law enforcement, fire, and medical response too. And I think across the board, it's an even bigger number. So there's another way that people can react to that psychologically with, why is this my problem? Why do I have to pass a tax measure when it's all these other things causing it? We need to go make the state pay for it. And that's true. But I just think it's a good idea to do that. We need to socialize that idea so people understand it, but you got to definitely connect it to the idea of that's why that sales tax is hanging that. Because if you hang the one out there, it doesn't really necessarily make a connection unless we actively do that.
So it sounds like this is like one of the sort of next steps, if you will, in terms of thinking about education. And I think, Bill's identified some of those areas. Obviously, we're talking about here, this connection I-70 about, sort of in that relationship. And to me, that would be one of those things going forward. Like, what is it that, would you call a guy softening the battlefield? Yeah. So, shaping that perception, and, I'm sure you have ideas around how to do that, but it seems like today we don't necessarily need to figure that out. We just sort of, I think that's an action. That's a step that you're going to need to take, assuming that you're moving forward with something on the ballot. What else?
I have a question related to that, and it's kind of adjacent. You saying, how about we tell a story? How many people reacted well to the media blitz with the Clear Path Home? They had a great video. They had, excerpts from the community. We loved it. We shared it with the board. Again, the people who were involved saw that, reacted well to it. I don't know how many other people in the community, like to Randy's point, the people who aren't on social media, the ones who aren't coming to meetings. I don't know how well that spread, but that's a really good example, or at least seems like a good example of what we're suggesting here. Do we know how well that landed with the community, and is that a model that could work here as well? Does that make sense? Do you even remember the video? That might be answering the question. Okay. But it was a campaign that, to put the information out there and tell a story so that the community understood what was being asked, what was being suggested. And I don't really know. I can't make that comparison, but it was a great was a great effort, a great story. So, yeah.
So I often then work with community or school district or a fire district to take what we've learned and put it into community outreach. And if I was thinking about this, first of all, I would spend a lot of time actually interviewing you all or talking to you all about how people in your communities get their information. I'd want to learn a lot more about Clear Creek County and your towns, but the thing I go to right away is age. I go and I see that 41.71% of people who would vote in this election are 65 and older. And I'm going to think right away how to communicate with them. I do think there is an important piece that is you have to have a multimedia outreach effort for something like this, right? I think infographics are really helpful. Did you know only 16% of our calls are on I-70? We got to get that out. We got to debunk the problems and hype up our positives, stuff like that. Did you know something on transparency and accountability, right? Did you know the fire authority has a board meeting that's open to the public and we review our budget just things like that lean into debunking the things we know are concerns and putting good information out about our positives. You would want to do that in a multifaceted way. So Facebook, social media, I love videos. I often say you got to make sure that you're communicating on these things, right? These are awesome and they're also a curse. So that goes to short videos, social media posts, not 600-word op-eds, right? No one reads that. Now, when I look at 41%, I want to think about how can I touch that group of 40, really make sure our strategy hits that 41%, 42% of folks who are 65 and older. So I think of a postcard mailer or something like that, which really lends itself to infographics and stuff like that, because folks are going to look at that for about 5 seconds. And if they at least see some important factoids in there, that's fine. So there's different things I would do, still work with the local newspaper. There's different things. Maybe there's a few town hall meetings. You always have the risk that no one comes, but it probably has to be in the list of options.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Meg.
Hi, it's Megan. Sorry, I'm joining in a little bit late. I had a doctor's appointment this morning. But yeah, no, I totally agree with everything you guys are saying. As for the Clear Path Home, we actually worked with an outside group to do that. And I don't think, in all honesty, that did very well, because it was an outside group that was kind of coming in and they wanted to make a whole new Instagram. They wanted to make a whole new Facebook for this. And I just don't think that was the answer. But anyways, I think casting a wide net, that's usually what I do, because like you said, not everybody is on social media. Town halls are really good because people can come in and ask questions, but like you said, not a ton of people show up to them. And I think a thing where we can get to maybe the older population is usually, the radio is great. When we go on the radio, they ask questions and we can have like an actual conversation and people can listen to it that way. I think that's always really helpful. Infographics are always really helpful, but I think if we're really trying to get this out there, we would have to, like when I first started and I wanted to get to know the community, I would sit at the rec center or I'd sit at the library and I would just talk to people and show people ways how to stay informed and get informed. So I think we would have to do something like that. Just because a lot of people see something on Facebook and maybe they don't trust it, or their Uncle Bill shared it and they don't know if it's real or something like that. So yeah, it would really have to be everybody doing this, because we have over 9,000 people in the community and we have like 4,000 likes on Facebook. That's not even half of the people. So it would just having to cast that wide net and rely on everybody's partners to kind of spread this around and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, and we're sort of talking about that outreach and there are other initiatives or efforts. I think about a project that I've been working on, Floyd Hill, and sort of the ways of communicating, not all across the entire county, but and other campaigns or other things to be able to tap into. George, did I? Did you want to weigh in?
No, I was just cracking my neck. I responding to Rich.
And again, it seems like we have one voice. We have to figure out what the ballot measure is gonna be. So that way we can use it, as Bill mentioned, as part of the marketing and educating piece. And a lot of us older folks come out for community events. I don't care if it's 4th of July, if it's for the barbecue, the ice cream social in Silver Plume. I think if we have infographics that we can take to those particular events, a lot of folks can get a little bit of education and know what the ballot measure is about. And we have a good window right now to hit a wide breadth of those different special events.
I think it's a good, especially if it comes from people that are involved in the fire because public opinion is very supportive of things like law enforcement and fire. That's always a top of the list. And so if in a small community, we've got people that are helping socialize that continually, the 4th of July table or something like that.
Exactly.
Where you're doing that work and you've got a fire authority table there, to be able to do that is, I think, an effective conduit. I mean, it's not going to get to everybody, but there's a segment of the population that will be very positively impacted by that. I believe.
Yeah, I agree.
Two thoughts real quick. So on the idea of community meetings or community events, absolutely. We did a big one up in the town of Basalt. Actually, they screwed up Tabor for 10 years and they were over collecting for 10 years on their property tax. That's warfare. We had to run a ballot question to correct the error and get people a refund. Brutal. But we created sandwich boards because they have lots of meat, and we did a bunch of sandwich boards, and those went to every farmer's market, blah, blah. And during the week, they sat on their main street, and then people took those boards to community events and they just set it up. We had a pamphlet to hand out. Guess what? We resolved that. We got folks their required refund. 2 years later, we passed a bond measure because we rebuilt the trust. And then we went and actually, I still can't believe it. 2 years later, we passed a bond measure for their mainly to redo their main street. So this stuff works. The other thing I'd just like to say is that a critical piece, not just trying to cast the wide net of comms and community outreach, but we also have, I find that the most successful efforts like this get highly engaged with what I call key opinion leaders in your community. That's business owners, if you have a chamber of commerce, all your elected officials, key leaders, nonprofit heads, just anyone you can identify as someone who shapes community opinion. And those could be naysayers too. But if you're educating and engaging that 10% of 5 to 10% of people in the community who are really active and really engaged and really involved, because they talk to people and they disseminate. And then when it comes time to vote, people truly look to those folks as, how should I vote on this? Is this a yes vote because I trust that person in the community, or they're a major employer and they're invested in our community and I trust them? Because those are folks we want to have endorsing this along the process.
What sounds like here, obviously, there are a couple, maybe some obvious observations. One is that you want to move forward putting something on the ballot, that a community sort of education that's targeted, that's casting a wide net, touching on the community leaders or influencers, and this everything in between that needs to be developed and would be developed. George, what else is on your next steps list here? And of course, getting to Rich's point that you need to know what it is that what you want to move forward with, and what some of the risks or opportunities are related to that in terms of the funding options, as we've talked about. But
there was a little bit of dialogue about the unincorporated stats and digging into 80452 and are those inside town, outside of town? that feels like, Bill, if you could just kind of go back and take a more careful look at that. I don't want to say more careful like it wasn't already careful. My guess is you'll come back and say, no, it's accurate, but want to give you the time.
So that's a check there.
I think on the county side, to do is to begin a conversation with Evergreen Fire Rescue about, what are your needs? Are you guys prepared to be supportive of a sales tax? That obviously, I mean, I think the way to do this is to share some of the revenue back to them. That stat that 1% funds good is based on this tax base, not the countywide tax base. Another thing on the county's thing is county needs to work on communicating our emergency response needs and probably conducting a similar survey and bringing that into the mix. I think that's on us. With respect to public information work, that's already on the next steps list. I think really important is for us to build some kind of a FAQ that responds directly to some of those comments that are in there, right? And I think some kind of a press release, we did a survey, here were the results. There were a lot of interesting comments. Here's a response to some of them, is a great place to start. And then something that we need to figure out is like, how are we continuing to fund this prep work? Do we need to continue to facilitate this group? Are we going to ask for more surveys? The county's general fund has supported our work to date. If the municipalities can find a way to chip in through some kind of an MOU or something, I think we would welcome that. I don't want to come off as though it's an expectation, but it's definitely something that I think we should discuss. And I'm not sure, I'll stop there. That's my list.
I think that with returning to surveys and going forward with this, just a couple of those things. I think it's critical that this work gets done. So I think it's important to continue with this group. I don't think further surveys are helpful in the near future. I think it's after you come to conclusions and do some of that socialization of concepts, and then maybe do a check-in and see how you might be moving the needle to try to get a feel for it at the end of the day. But I also want to go back to a previous part of the discussion that was brought up. What we're facing as a county. I mean, this is really important work that's happening right here. We have gotten an IGA together. We're moving forward. We got to figure out what happens here. I'm just going to be very blunt and say that the county has to have a revenue enhancing tool for overall county operations right now, or we're going to have a much larger problem than this one that we're talking about in this room. And it's a fact. We've got to deal with both of these. We can multitask. I should say you can multitask. I won't be in the room soon, but we really have, there has to be a supply side, a revenue side solution to the county budget problem. It was interesting to see that popular opinion up there that we just need the county to stop wasting money and then asking for more, when we have to ask for more and we've cut everything we can out of what we're doing. There's no wasting going on at the county that I can think of anymore. I mean, everything can always be done a little better tomorrow than it was done today, but we've been on this path for a few years now, trying to respond to the reduction in revenues from the Henderson mine. And it's still a thing. And we've got the impacts of the Floyd Hill project to traffic through the county. We can look at traffic counts. If traffic counts hold up, then we should be able to see our sales tax revenue should reflect more what's going on generally in the surrounding area. And I'm hopeful to see that. Sales tax problems we're seeing right now, I don't think are just confined to Clear Creek. And so I'm expecting those to probably move back, but cutting all that out, we've got two things to deal with here, and that's a really big problem. And so I want everybody to take seriously what George said a little bit ago about, we can't just, if we take this and make it the highest priority and throw it out there and sabotage the ability for the county for 2 or 3 years to find a way to solve this revenue problem, we're going to be in deep trouble in a lot of ways.
And I think really some 40 to 50% of our general fund costs are sheriff's office, right? And this, like the emergency response community, it's a community, right? It's the sheriff's office can't do it alone. Clear Creek EMS can't do it alone. Like, I don't know how often you guys are on scene at the same time, and I don't know the extent to which you feel like you need a solid sheriff's office or a solid EMS department to do your job.
99%.
So I mean, what we're really talking about here is making sure that when someone calls 911, they get the right response. They get the whole team there, you know? So thank you, Randy. And,
Can I explore this sort of increasing revenue without, Randy, without reducing? So I guess I didn't quite understand that connection with obviously facing revenue cuts. You need additional revenue but not to jeopardize the overall.
What I'm saying is that you can, it's hard to run one taxation ballot measure and be successful. Running multiple taxation ballot measures, I mean, I'm a tax and spend liberal, believe me, I'm a communist, okay? I want to tax everybody for everything they've got. I want your cars, you know, I want everything.
Okay.
That's a campaign.
And but I get my ballot, and if I see a whole bunch of stuff on there, I'm just like, no. I mean, I have that same gut check reaction that everybody else does too. There's too much and it's too confusing, or I'm irritated by so many asks. So, and the point is that we're going to have a really big ask. We're going to have a really big ask coming from the county at large to bolster the general fund. There's no way around it. And so that's happening concurrent with this effort right now. And we need to be strategic and partners on timing and sequencing and how we do it, or what kinds of taxes you ask for or something. There've got to be ways that we figure out how to, because they're both critical needs.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. We've already talked about the public information, that engagement with Evergreen, sort of the idea of potentially a share back or some sort of method around that. That's task. What else in terms, and then, sort of like, I guess it rolls into what are we doing with this group? What are we doing? And so I'll just say that, in terms of from this group, sort of my role in this had been, really thinking about the way in which, getting to an IGA. And sort of when Brian and I first started talking about that seemed like that was a big hill to climb in terms of to be able to come together. The question would be, for you all continuing to meet with or without my role in that is sort of what would be the work plan? Obviously, this sort of thinking about that, what would be the sort of the benefit? Obviously, singing off the same page, having a consistent message at this level, this kind of representation is an essential part about building that confidence kind of going forward and enhancing that confidence that the fire authority already has. But what are you thinking about if this group was to go forward? What would be their tasks and frequency with or with that? What do y'all think? That's sort of transition to our next steps conversation, but I didn't, I just want to make sure that if there's anything else there in terms of the survey results. Okay, what about this? What would you all be doing? What would be the purpose of you all continuing in this after now that you've got to a significant milestone?
I think you have to let the survey percolate a little bit through all the different entities. Plus, we know there's going to be different players at the table. I would say we probably need to meet in February once some of those folks have cut their teeth a little bit and figure out what next steps are going to be.
Okay.
I don't know.
So when you're thinking of percolation, it's about sort of engaging with different boards and groups and sort of just sitting on the information.
County commissioners, the new folks in Georgetown, all that.
Yeah. And then
because they need time to get up to speed and figure out how they're going to contribute to that one voice. The one path that we're going to have to sell the members.
Lynette, is that a hand up?
Well, I know you said February, Rich, but for Georgetown, just as an example, it would be more like, you know, the elections in April, so at least May or June. And the fire authority, the new IGA is built to have a further meeting in June. Wasn't it June to review
Just
numbers and
pull up Peter's final draft. Yeah, you're right, though.
I'll jump in, Lynette. You're accurate. And I think over the long run, 1 or 2 meetings a year of this group, I think is a really good idea. My takeaway from our time meeting together is that this is a necessary part of the model that we have. And it's something I'm willing to embrace for my last 2 years in office. As far as next year, if we're serious about being successful in a ballot measure, I think we probably need to be thinking about meeting more like monthly. I can see an argument for saying maybe not in January. Maybe in January we focus on bringing our individual boards up to speed. I am more than willing to participate in those agenda items on your 4 board things if we think that's helpful. I might not be the most popular person in the room, but I'm willing to take the arrows or whatever. But I think we need to be monthly, and I think we need to just continue to hash this out and work on this and keep each other accountable to accomplishing our to-dos. And so that's my pitch.
Yeah, so we obviously have some next steps here. And so when you're thinking about, hashing out, like just in terms of like, I'm thinking about agenda topics, I'm thinking about like sort of tasks that would be related to this so that we think about, sort of, success. Brian,
I was just gonna say the IGA reads that we'll meet at least once a year by June 1st.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no later than June 1st.
Guess I have an input. If the intent of this group is to transition away from the fist fight for the IGA that we've completed to collectively, how do we fund emergency services in the county, and also how do we fund the deficit, at the county level, which I think is honestly a property tax increase. We've been for 20 years going, Henderson's been a stray of us, but it's not. Is this a good time to transition this group to be more multifaceted, what we're looking at all these funding streams and move it forward? Because no matter how you look at this, whether it's fire authority funding, or it's funding for the sheriff's office or EMS, or it's how do you fund the county, because Henderson is eventually going to shut down. We're supposed to be perfectly honest here. It's going to take everybody in this room or whoever replaces us in this room to collectively work together in a board format. So the messaging is consistent, it gets out there, or we're not going to be successful. Just my observation. But so is this a good time to say we don't need to be moderated? Because I think we can all sit in the same room and have an adult conversation consistently. I think we've really proven that over the last 6 months.
Sure have.
But understand that we collectively need to focus on multifaceted funding options for all of us to survive. Because even as a municipality, none of us as municipalities can survive without some support function from the county, whether we like it or don't like it. That's the reality with which we live. So it's kind of on all of us to continue to work towards those common goals over the next year or 2 years, whatever that takes. Even 5 years to get where we need to be, because 2036 is coming faster than we probably all realize. And that's a lot of our 40 somewhat % of our tax revenue right now from Henderson. It has to be replaced moving forward. So that's just my thoughts.
Yeah. What I would put on the agenda if we were to meet in January would be looking at a draft of a frequently asked questions document, like response to those comments, and a press release about we got the survey, here's what it said. It would be that. It would be really looking at some numbers around different ballot measures and what they could fund, and like really mapping that out, what our options are. Sharing some initial reactions, discussing next steps, right? Reporting back on conversations with Evergreen Fire Rescue, like these next steps, right? That these next steps would be the agenda for a January meeting if we chose to have one.
Yeah.
And I would
See heads nodding around that.
I would welcome that meeting, but I wouldn't begrudge you all if you said, as much as I like you, I could do a month without you.
It doesn't matter to me.
Well, then we're gonna do it at the beginning of January.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
But see heads nodding around sort of doing that. I think, Jeremy, your idea, sort of moving on from the IGA, the structure and governance piece to really focusing on the collective funding in the context of the overall county and the overall fire, sheriff, EMS funding, those funding streams, and really looking at that collectively. That seemed like a sort of a good transition, along with, kind of all of the tasks that you've been talking about in terms of beginning the public education, starting maybe in January with the draft FAQs, and really kind of framing out what that looks like in terms of those streams. So that sounds like meaningful time for you all to do that.
Are you all comfortable if we ask Megan to be the sort of, Brian, you included, if we ask Megan to house collecting the response to those comments, and then we all accept a responsibility to go read through that document and offer the responses that we might provide and get them to, if you can get them to Brian can.
The FAQ.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can take a stab at a draft of an FAQ and we'll take any input all the stakeholders have.
That sound reasonable?
What's the time frame on that?
I mean, we're heading into Christmas season, so you think we should not meet in January?
Yes.
Early February meeting?
February would be good.
Yeah.
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 The holidays gives us some time to help the FAQ.
Yeah.
And what did Rich say, percolate or mature or something along those lines? Yeah. And so, I guess one of the things would be to sort of outline some critical dates as well, of kind of like in terms of moving forward and have a work back schedule associated with what needs to happen in terms of laying the foundation, laying, all of those pieces. But February meeting, FAQ, a timeline with some critical dates of work back dates, if you're going to, kind of think about that, and some, critical steps along the way.
Should we look at our calendars? Early February? I agree, and I took those, I noted those down.
Okay.
Any first week of February? There we go. Or maybe the second. Maybe the 10th? Is that too late?
The mayors and commissioners meeting the next day on the 11th. Fourth.
Board of Selectmen also, yeah. But the 10th is open for me.
Yeah, 10th is good with us.
Afternoon.
10 at 10?
Afternoon.
10 at 1?
Yeah, I would need the afternoon.
Afternoon is better.
So proposal 10, February 10 at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Kelly? Fabian?
Let me see.
You're gonna jump off. We're good. We'll make it work.
So 1 to 3,
Last call?
February 10, going once.
Here?
We can,
If you guys, do you want to make here or Georgetown? This room is available.
Kind of like this room feels a little tighter.
more intimate,
It's available.
less formal.
Here,
Okay,
February 10th, 1 o'clock, we'll get a meeting invite out.
Um. What else then? So I think is also, you know, and and Jeremy appreciate that around sort of what, if you need a moderator, facilitator, you know, the sort of the envisioned part of, I had talked with Brian about was to the IGA part. We can talk about this offline or otherwise, but, you know, just thinking that, you know, you all are pretty functional and, you know, sort of, you know, doing really well. And so I don't, you know, it's like,
I was gonna ask the question, right? Because we've kind of hit our limit, what we agreed we were gonna pay, so. I think it's up to the team with whether or not we think we need a facilitator or not.
As you change people in the seats, chemistry is going to change.
Good point.
And take a stab at in February and not having a facilitator and then decide.
sounds good to me.
You've guided us well. I think we've all learned quite a bit about, you know, bigger group cooperating together. So, yeah.
You guys have done great. And I'm always ready to help if needed. But you know, it's been, as I've said, if this is my last meeting, that super impressed by this group, your ability to work through those governance funding issues. And I think you're an example to the county, and that's sort of what's needed in order to address big challenges is groups like yourselves to be able to work collectively to do so. So we'll plan on not putting that I'll put it on my calendar just tentatively, but not plan to join unless you all change your mind. Good. And then as a facilitator, I think, you know, you always get points if you end early. Is there anything else for the good of this group?
I'm gonna start calling us the emergency response team.
Yeah, there's that.
Sounds good.
Because I think I'm punny.
Anything else? Then I think it's back to you, Commissioner, to close the meeting out. Take public.
Yes. Seeing nothing further on the agenda, we're adjourned.
There you go. Thanks,
I
everyone.
didn't speak quick enough. Bill, thank you, because I've been part
Yeah.
of the group that's been
thank you.
privileged to work with you, and I learned a lot by watching the process. So thank you for all of your help on that. On this.
And Jonathan.
Yes, both.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Commissioner Ive.
Hi, everybody.
You? Hey.
Ah.